news from domestic
You're listening to the official Reformed Stoic podcast, covering politics, philosophy, theology, conspiracy theories. I'm ready to get to the bottom of this life. Are you? Join Wolfgang, Sketty Squad, Purity Gang, as we strive to take dominion over this dying planet. I am Reformed Stoic, and this is my podcast.
My cue. I forgot to come in. Okay, things like the chat being on screen. I didn't think about any of this stuff. Let's see, the chat used to be on screen. We don't really usually get TTS. I don't know if I need to change something for TTS. I think not. I think my TTS is still hooked up the same way it was before. Think everything should be good. Let's go ahead and get started here. Yeah, so no more chat on the screen. That's fine. That's just like a little dealy bobber. If I decide, I guess I could, hook that up over this week or something. Yeah, biggest earthquake ever recorded. Pretty crazy. I know there's footage of a tsunami in Kodiak, and that was probably taken from that time. All right, guys. Well, this is my first podcast on my backup channel. Something tells me things are going to be a little bit bumpy. Maybe we'll get a momentum going and more people will show up. But, man, the bottom line is when you're not on your main channel, you just don't really get the same audience you usually get. So we're dropping down to 3 streams a week. I already planned to do that again. But, yeah, we're dropping down to 3 streams a week. I'm not going to try as hard to make them as long as they used to be. If we just blow right through it in like an hour, I think I'm going to be all right with that. Basically, I just want to keep the podcast alive, man. If we can kind of get our regular audience back over here, that would be great. I was saying I wanted to podcast here indefinitely as a means of saving my channel because I got 2 strikes over there, and one of them doesn't wear off until September 28th. So that's like gonna be about a month out or so. Yeah, real wrench thrown in our momentum, guys. It really kind of hurt me to take that strike, and I don't know. I mean, it might be a good idea to move back to the main channel once the first strike, like once my ban is up, but you know, we cover some pretty spicy topics. I would sure hate to get a 3rd strike and lose my main channel forever. But yeah, I mean, whatever, dude. I'm gonna keep doing these. Maybe at some point, like I'll download the VODs and upload them on my main channel. Maybe like after all is just freaking said and done, way in the future, in September 28th. Which, you know, I mean, the time's probably going to fly by. So, like, someday in a galaxy far, far away, on September 28th, when one of my strikes wears off, and then I only have 1 active strike on my channel, then we'll move the podcast back. So, as far as what happens between now and then, I'm just going to do the best I can, guys. If things are slow, then I'm not going to make the podcast quite as long. I'm at least not going to go out of my way to make the podcast as long. I really just want to keep everything alive. So, with that said, I saw today that Fauci is stepping down from his White House position, so we're gonna watch some news on that. Then we're going to check out a little bit of stuff on domestic terrorism. Actually, I never pulled up an article for that. Let's go ahead and we got a few videos for that. Let me go ahead and pull up an article for domestic terrorism. Probably not going to take very long. Here we go. 1 second. theconversation.com. Right-wing extremism is growing. There we go. Oh, wait a second. Is this it? Do I click on this? So when is this from? This is from May 15th, 2022. Yeah, all right. We got a little something for that. So let's go ahead and get to the news segment, guys. Hope everybody's doing good. I'm feeling good, man. You know I just made that video on this channel about the importance of routine and momentum for me. I kind of lose it on the weekends, but it is very easy for me to pick it back up come Monday morning. I played my drums today. That was awesome. I had a workout today, doing the podcast. Gonna get some reading done. I watched Monty Python and the Holy Grail last night. And then I ended up thinking, wow, this is kind of degenerate, and this seems to kind of be mocking God a little bit. So I did a little bit of research. I looked up Life of Brian. Really interesting story behind Monty Python Life of Brian. They couldn't get funding for it, and guess who stepped in and funded it? Mr. George Harrison from the Beatles, and that is what led him to make that quote that the Beatles are bigger than Jesus, and I'm not really sure what's going to go first, Christianity or rock and roll. And then I looked up some speculation like Monty Python, like Python, the snake, the serpent, Satan. So, yeah, Monty Python's kind of degenerate. I still like the Holy Grail overall, but I've already been through this. Like, since I bought the DVD, I watched it once. It's like, okay, yeah, this is a little bit more degenerate than I remember it. Like the angels blowing the trumpet with their butts and stuff. And, a lot of things become less fun when you're a hardcore Christian, man. What can I say? But anyway, let's go ahead and get the topics rolling for today. Looks like we got some friendly faces in chat, so we're going to make it, boyos. We're going to get through this. Let's get to the news segment. You're listening to the Reformed Stoic News segment. Let's go! Julian? Dirty dancing, Julian. Okay. Let's get it going. Hold on. Let me just organize all my crap. Okay. Okay, let's get the gang over here. Let's get the news over here, and let's freaking get it. Dr. Fauci to step down from White House and NIAID in December. Looks like we're going to learn about a special somebody.
We have breaking news from the White House. Dr. Anthony Fauci is retiring. The man who led the U.S. response to the COVID-19 pandemic is stepping down from his role as the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases in December. Fauci has served under 7 U.S. presidents, both Republican and Democrat, and for almost 4 decades served as the director of the NIAID. In a statement, Dr. Fauci said it has been the honor of his lifetime to have led the institute, which he called a, quote, extraordinary institution. Also in a statement, President Biden said, quote, I extend my deepest thanks for his public service. The United States of America is stronger, more resilient, and healthier because of him.
Just getting in the getaway car. Just real getting in the getaway car and speeding the hell out of Dodge hours while people who took the lipstick start dropping like flies, if you ask me. It's like, I mean, you know, that's not necessarily has to be. I think he took a lot of flack. He was trying to help, gosh darn it. He was just trying to help. And everybody was mean. Let's see what the people have to say. He said before he retired, there will be a biggest outbreak. Yeah, maybe he's like, screw this. I don't want to deal with it anymore. Or he's getting in the getaway car. Let's go. That we haven't had a serious inquiry into the events surrounding COVID and everything these people did, but they couldn't have a January 6th hearing fast enough is completely disgusting and unacceptable. Ha ha ha. That's a good point. Like oh my gosh, January 6th. Dude, January 6th was like a freaking glow up. And yeah, we're going to end up going over some of that today. January 6th, Capitol rioter faces 15-year sentence after domestic terrorism. So, January 6th. What about COVID, brah? What about the traitors? Where are the demoralized and reconditioned? You'd think they'd be flooding this story with expressions of their eternal gratitude to Fauci for keeping them safe. A reminder to always follow the science, unless you've already supported authoritarian mandates that contradict the science. In that case, work to bury the science. Ooh, we got a lot of replies here. Facts. Until I can go no longer be buried, then run away from it. You sound like our dearly beloved leaders in Washington and MSM. Gain of function, baby. I'm not really exactly sure what that whole gain of function thing was about. Does thinking there are more than two genders still follow the science? Does thinking about other people's genders still make you creepy? Cringe. All right, like I said, we're not going to drag this out. Let's keep moving on.
Right now, Dr. Anthony Fauci has just announced that he is stepping down at the end of the year, leaving his post as both the president's chief medical advisor and also the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, a role he has held for decades under 7 U.S. presidents. CNN's Arlette Saenz is live with more on this. Arlette, what are you hearing from the White House on this?
Well, Kate, President Biden announced Dr. Anthony Fauci's departure in a statement a bit earlier today as the nation's top infectious disease expert and top medical advisor to President Biden is planning to step down from his government post in December. Now, Dr. Anthony Fauci also released a statement in which he said, quote, "While I am moving on from my current positions, I am not retiring. After more than 50 years of government service, I plan to pursue the next phase of my career while I still have so much energy and passion for my field. I want to use what I have learned as NIAID director to continue to advance science and public health and to inspire and mentor the next generation of scientific leaders as they help prepare the world to face future infectious disease threats." Now, President Biden has known Dr. Anthony Fauci for decades, working closely with him back when he was vice president as the Obama administration dealt with the Zika virus. And the president, in his statement thanking Fauci for his work, he said, quote, "His commitment to the work is unwavering, and he does it with an unparalleled spirit, energy, and scientific integrity. Because of Dr. Fauci's many contributions to public health, lives here in the United States and around the world have been saved." Now, Dr. Anthony Fauci has served in government for decades now in this post as director of the National Institutes of Allergies and Infectious Diseases for nearly 38 years, starting under President Ronald Reagan. He has advised presidents throughout that tenure dealing with things like the HIV/AIDS epidemic, the Zika virus, Ebola as well. But he really rose to the spotlight during the COVID-19 pandemic when he was publicly clashing at times with former President Donald Trump relating to his strategy. President Biden asked him to stay on, and now we are learning that Dr. Fauci will be stepping down in December.
Arlette, thank you so much for that. Joining me now is CNN medical analyst Dr. Jonathan Reiner, medical advisor to the Bush-Cheney White House. Thank you for jumping on when we got this news, Dr. Reiner. What's your reaction to hearing this announcement from Dr. Fauci and how you reflect on all of his years in public service?
Well, I'd like to congratulate Dr. Fauci on a career really without a comparison. I think anyone who's practiced medicine or trained in medicine in the last 40 years has studied from the textbook that he is the author of. His contributions to medicine go well beyond the COVID pandemic. And as you said, he was instrumental in helping to construct the U.S. response to the HIV/AIDS epidemic in the early 80s when I was training in medicine, SARS, Zika, the anthrax attacks, and now COVID and monkeypox. So Dr. Fauci has been the tip of our medical spear in responding to these crises, and I wish him well.
Just last month, Dr. Fauci was on, and I had asked him, there had been some talk about his retirement plans, and I asked him about if and when he would retire. I'm going to play for you part of what he told me.
I can't be in this job forever, and I don't anticipate I'll be in this job before the end, at the end of the first term of President Biden, which is January 2025.
At that point, he said that to me because he was trying to get everyone to tamp down talk of his retirement. But he did make clear that no matter when it would be, which now we know would be in December, that it was not the end of his career. And as Arlette was just reading, one of the things that I know that he says that he wants to do is to inspire the next generation of scientific leaders. What do you think that looks like?
Well, maybe this will give him more time to be a mentor. I hope it gives him more time to write. And to be an inspiration to young physicians and kids in high school. I would say that I would hope that this president would give Dr. Fauci the Presidential Medal of Freedom, but he's already received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I think he's probably frustrated with how much politics has polluted the work that he has to do. He's not just a scientist and chief medical advisor to the president, but the world in which he lives has been incredibly politicized. Just last week, there were, members of Congress telling him to clear his calendar when the House changes majorities so that he could testify, pretty much, full time. The concept of doing that, I think, has to be very, very unappealing for him.
You mentioned the AIDS crisis. I mean, he was on far before COVID had anything. I mean, he really was on the front lines of the AIDS crisis. What do people need to remember about that?
Well, he received a lot of criticism, and some of it I think well placed. But I think when you talk to people who have been central to the AIDS and HIV crisis for the last 40 years, I think he's come to gain their respect. I think he has listened to his critics, and ultimately HIV/AIDS has been transformed into a disease that, when I was a resident, killed every single person that it infected, to now a chronic disease that people live very long and very healthy lives with, and that hasn't happened without people like Tony Fauci, and it hasn't happened without his leadership. So you can ask people central to the HIV/AIDS epidemic how much Tony Fauci has really garnered their respect, and I think you'll see that they're uniform in their praise for him now.
Yeah, man. Interesting information floating out around there about these pandemics. It sounds like a lot of them could be warning, tinfoil hat material incoming. Like, a lot of them could be some sort of a scam, all the way back to the Spanish flu. All the way back to the Spanish flu. There's just a lot of money in the vaccines. It's an easy way to get the people panicking, to kill some people. Polio vaccine was tested in Africa. There were some problems with that. I'm not going to lie. I think some of this stuff is a little bit beyond my comprehension. I mean, I'm always thinking about it, but all I know is that the feel of 2020 till now, the whole COVID thing just felt very off. It feels like the entire world shifted gears. It feels like the global system just shifted gears. Like, I think I said this way back when. If you watch the movie 13 Ghosts, we're getting towards Halloween season. Absolutely love October, dude. I think I'm going to be watching Jason and maybe, let's see, Friday the 13th movies and Nightmare on Elm Street movies, all October. But in 13 Ghosts, they're like in this machine. Let's say that machine is the globalist system, and it will change. The machine will like change, and different doors shut, different doors open, different spirits get set free, different parts of the trap unlock. I feel like that's kind of what happened in 2020. Like the whole system just shifted gears. We arrived in a different step of the plot. That's how it felt. There will always be masses of people who think that sound ridiculous. We just had a pandemic, chud. It was just a pandemic. It's not a conspiracy. Nobody's trying to kill you. Well, one can't be so sure. The education system in U.S. seems to have failed miserably. That's a interesting time to say that. I wonder what he means. Wonder what his end game is here. Failing? You haven't seen anything yet. Look at Democrat cities like Baltimore. You're right. Yeah, I think I looked at some graduation rates in Baltimore. It was pretty brutal. But I thought Fauci was science and living person. I wanted to say this during the segment. You get to a point where you cringe every time you hear somebody say the word science on the news, because they just want you to be impressed by that word. And, I've been dealing with scientific atheists for a long time. Well, we do it in the name of science. Well, that's the difference between science and your beliefs. Well, he's going to be continuing to try to make innovations in science, and he's going to try to inspire the next generation of science. Science this, science that. Like, excuse me for not, dropping my jaw. Like, oh, so he said science. It's in the name of science. Like, you get to a point, and it takes a while, but you've been around the block enough, and you start to realize when they say science, that's your cue to be like, oh, they're the experts. They have the answers. They have the answers. I'll look at my big Orwellian TV screen, and the experts will tell me that the science is taken care of, and that's my cue to realize that everything's okay and everything's handled. You'll get it one day, boyos, if you don't yet. Patience, patience. He and 2 other 40-year doctors I know at the NIH know so much more than they can tell the public. I thank them all, including the late Dr. Willie Bergdorfer. Snoopy endorses this message. Let's go. Rest on your laurels, Dr. Fauci. From the family of one of his colleagues, the late Dr. Arthur G. Perry. Rick Perry hype. Nightmare on Elm Street, the one where they're in the hospital. That one gave me nightmares for years. Yeah, somebody was recommending that one the other day. Was that number 3, Dream Warriors? Or there's one called like Mind. I don't know, dude. I'm going to try to marathon both of them. All the Friday the 13th and all the Nightmare on Elm Streets. Maybe I'll watch 2 movies a night. 1 Nightmare on Elm Street, 1 Friday the 13th. Let's freaking go. The thumb is gone. Fauci's gone. It's all gone. The timing of Dr. Fauci stepping down is certainly interesting. Yeah, kind of like he's getting in the getaway car and speeding away. Just like I said. He's a doctor of racketeering, criminality, money, nothing else. Oh, by the way, maybe a good time to remind everybody that our friend, Mr. Fauci, is a Jesuit. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I think the timing was perfect, dude. I gave my little spiel on Jesuits at the compound, and then I gave it to Baked Alaska when I stream sniped the RV. And then, a big floating Jesuit head told everybody when to go inside and when we were allowed to go outside, and it's kind of like perfect timing. You mean when he's so old, he's finally had enough, and people in this country have cognitively devolved to the point he can no longer help them anyway? Yes, how interesting. What you have typed here is gibberish. It's nonsensical. Why are you incapable of basic communication? Whoa, Jim's getting smeared. It's not science. Oh, here we go. Return smear fire. No, actually I typed the truth, and you just didn't like hearing it. Let's go. Are you incapable of logic? Double smear. They're both smearing Led Zeppelin. Yeah, you can get on that Led Zeppelin and sled down the hill, buddy. It's over. I think that's a bot account. There's a reason why your registration date was in 2008 and mine was in 2011. But Jim Lewis' registration date was less than 6 months ago. No, you just got smeared, bro. It's all good. You might be right, but it's become nearly impossible to differentiate between poorly programmed and poorly translated Russian. Oh, it's a Russian bot. It's a Russian bot, everybody. You're probably a freaking anonymizer comment. No, everybody's just bots. It's a bunch of Russian bots, and the Russian bots and the anonymizer are arguing, dude. There's not even any people here. All right. Let's keep on keeping on. We got an article on this as well. This is just one more short news segment. I'm gonna reboot. I don't know about reboots. I'm not really a reboot guy, but I'm gonna reboot. Yeah, I don't know about reboots, dude. Maybe I'll check out some reboots, but I'm definitely going to watch the OGs first. I love 80s gore and just like 80s effects and all that stuff and makeup.
Well, we are following some breaking news. Dr. Anthony Fauci is stepping down from his position as director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. The 84-year-old announced today that he will be stepping down from the position in December. He has led the agency for 38 years. In a statement following the news of his, well, maybe not retirement, President Biden praised Fauci's work as a dedicated public servant who helped make the country stronger, more resilient, and healthier. And the reason why I say maybe not retirement is he was actually asked about whether or not he would continue to serve in this position in the next administration, whether it is a Democratic administration or a Republican administration. And he said that he would most likely be stepping down from his position, but he certainly would not be retiring, and he's ready to move on to whatever his next chapter is. But, you know, he took the reins of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases in the mid-1980s when the country was dealing with the emerging AIDS and HIV crisis. He has helped to shepherd and guide this country through a number of public health crises, AIDS, Zika, Ebola, and, of course, COVID-19. The White House statement that the president released sort of reminds everyone that Dr. Fauci, it says here, served under 7 Republican.
You know, I definitely remember bird flu. I remember Zika virus as well. When I was going through that shitty rap deal, the guy who was like jerking me around, I kept calling him and he'd be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, dude. I don't know what's wrong with me, man. I think I got the Zika virus or something." And he was like, he was being an asshole to me, dude. He was trying to say, "Oh, dude, I don't know why I haven't been returning your calls, man. I think I might be coming down with that Zika virus." So the Zika virus was going on around like 2016. The bird flu was like when I was in high school or maybe middle school. That was around the time I watched Conan O'Brien every night. I feel like those were like tests. Those were like surveys. That was like getting a census of how people react to pandemics. And then COVID was like a higher level test of like, let's see what happens when there actually is a pandemic. I know it sounds like tinfoil hat. Like, what basis? What reason do you have to believe? Why would they ever do that? Well, it's just interesting. It's interesting to think about the bird flu. Everybody laughed at the bird flu, as far as I remember. Nobody really took bird flu seriously. I certainly didn't feel affected by Zika virus. I don't really remember that being a big deal. Bird flu, Zika virus, COVID. So I don't know, man. I think there's just something going on that we don't understand with this stuff.
Republican and Democratic presidents during his career, beginning with Ronald Reagan. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2008 under President George W. Bush. For almost 4 decades, he has served as director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, helping our country navigate health crises ranging from HIV, AIDS to COVID-19. Because of Dr. Fauci's many contributions to public health, lives here in the United States and around the world have been saved.
Yeah, and Ebola. I remember talks of Ebola as well. That was pretty big by the time I was on 4chan. I got on 4chan right like 2017, like after Trump won. After Trump won the election, I saw Pooh Burrito's video the year that 4chan won, and I was like, man, this place sounds crazy. Dude, that's like a crazy time to think about, man. The beginning of like spending time on 4chan poll and just, you know, getting really deep into it for the first time, and those are kind of cozy memories. Beginning in 2017. Tell him it's good he stepped down, but don't go too far, just in case of a federal indictment. Praise the Lord. Thank you. Best news. Glad to hear. He did the world a disservice. Okay. Wow, you call crimes against humanity a disservice? Yeah. As the highest paid government employee in his 80s, I'm sure he'll be able to scrape by. He shouldn't be allowed to resign. He should be arrested. Damn. It be like that sometimes, though. Smearing and sketting it. They got people to willingly lock themselves up without firing a shot. This ain't over. Yeah, man, lots of small businesses took a nosedive. Lots of people were like mentally fucked up. A lot of people killed themselves, dude. A lot of people couldn't handle this shit. He belongs behind bars. The traitor. All right. Good riddance to dangerous Dr. Fauci. Opinion editorial. When somebody labels something an opinion editorial, that means that, like, you can't say it's like, oh, it's fake news, fake news. They're admitting that it's their opinion. I feel like the other stuff was just regurgitating what we've already seen in the videos. So let's go ahead and hear from our little buddy, whoever wrote this on the New York Post. Dr. Anthony Fauci announced that he will be stepping down as director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases come December. Whether you've met him personally or not, he has touched all Americans' lives with his work. President Joe Biden said of news that his chief medical advisor, Anthony Fauci, is finally retiring. Biden's only too right, tragically. Fauci's COVID guidance was disastrous. Fauci, now 81, initially greeted COVID by insisting it wasn't a major threat, only to flip almost overnight into a strident hawk. He demanded contact tracing, a measure as costly as it was useless. He called for economic shutdowns and national school closures. He ridiculed efforts to focus protective efforts narrowly on the truly vulnerable, the elderly and the immunocompromised. He mocked the idea that people who recovered from COVID had some degree of natural immunity, after having once proposed it himself. And he did all this even as he doubted in private the efficacy of masks and the existence of asymptomatic spread. His overgrown ego, in short, led him to promote the most destructive federal and state policies in recent U.S. memory. And as of late July, he was still at it, saying we shouldn't have had much more stringent restrictions. We should have had much more stringent restrictions to fight asymptomatic COVID spread in 2020. This, when his tactics accomplished nothing. The United States did worse on overall COVID outcomes than did Sweden, which never closed schools nor implemented other draconian policies. Yet Fauci's chief sin likely came before COVID even reached these shores. As chief of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, he championed and oversaw funding for labs in China that performed gain-of-function research on viruses. Then, as the face of the nation's coronavirus response, he joined the drive to render unmentionable the idea that the virus might have leaked from the Wuhan lab. And for all the lives his ideas cost and all the needless pain they inflicted, Fauci has not been and looks likely never to be held accountable. In his own words, the good doctor is leaving to pursue his next chapter. For the sake of the world, we hope it's focused on gardening. Fauci's too dangerous to be anywhere near the levers of power. Let's take a look at the comments. Fauci is addicted to fame. He can't get enough of being in the spotlight. We will continue seeing him on mainstream media in his retirement. Serious question. Does Fauci, along with his $350,000 a year pension, come with built-in immunity from prosecution? Hopefully that next chapter includes taking a long walk on a short pier. Cool. Well, Fauci, I wish you the best as you ride off into the sunset, despite what everyone else has said. Belongs behind bars. I personally know someone who killed themselves. Almost feel like it could have been me in another timeline. It's creepy, man. Yeah, things just changed. This is a big thing that people got through, and, life is still going, but things have definitely not gone back to normal, and I don't think they ever will. The world already had problems before this was going on, big time. Mehdi Hassan calls conservatives cheering far-right messages at CPAC fascism. So this is pretty new, August 4th, 2022. 20 days ago.
Cast your mind back to 2 years ago. It was the summer of 2020. Donald Trump was still in office. Federal agents were being sent into American cities like Portland and Seattle and using war tactics against protesters for racial justice. And I was in this very seat, filling in for Chris Hayes for the first time, when I said we should start talking about the F word, fascism. I've worked around the globe. I've interviewed prime ministers and government officials, dictators, despots, authoritarians. And I think it's time in America that we finally have a proper conversation about the F word. No, not that one. Fascism. I know, it's really controversial. People get very uncomfortable when you mention it. But to borrow a line, if not now, when? And if not us, the free press, then who? For far too long, we have shied away from saying the F word. For a lot of people, calling Donald Trump a fascist was just ad hominem, a lazy political insult. It was the liberal who cried wolf. Look, I get it. Fascism is associated with dictatorships, with mass murder. And we've not had either yet here in the US, thank God. Although, like with every good authoritarian, there is the question of whether President Trump will leave office when the time comes. Of course, Donald Trump tried very hard to remain in office after he lost the election. And if you look at these images from the other day, well, it seems as if things have gotten even worse. On Tuesday, the ex-president hosted the far-right authoritarian leader of Hungary, Viktor Orban, at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey. He even found what looks like a fake White House to serve as the background for the photo op. Trump and Orban sat down for this meeting on opposite sides of a long table filled with aides, as if they are both still world leaders at some sort of international summit. Orban arrived in the United States fresh off a widely condemned speech in which he berated Europeans for becoming a, quote, mixed-race society. He claimed that countries who have welcomed migrants from outside of Europe are, quote, no longer nations. They are nothing more than a conglomeration of peoples, adding, quote, we do not want to become peoples of mixed race. This is not new rhetoric from Viktor Orban. For years, liberals have been warning about the danger of this, yes, I would argue, fascist leader, as the American far-right has embraced him. Last year, Fox host Tucker Carlson even took his TV show to Hungary for a week of shows fawning over Orban and his policies, which are anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ, and anti-freedom of the press. But now it's not just liberals who are condemning Orban. Here is a very recent condemnation of the Hungarian Prime Minister, quote, I don't know how you didn't notice that you were presenting a pure Nazi text worthy of Goebbels, referring, of course, to Adolf Hitler's chief propagandist, Joseph Goebbels. That did not come from some left-leaning MSNBC host or a Democratic congressman. Those are the words of Viktor Orban's own long-standing advisor, who worked with him for 20 years. She quit over that speech. But can you guess where Viktor Orban is still welcome and even revered? That would be right here in the US of A at the Conservative Political Action Conference taking place in Dallas, Texas. Today, Viktor Orban delivered a speech to CPAC titled How We Fight. It was an adoring crowd.
The globalists can all go to hell. I have come to Texas.
That very diverse crowd at CPAC stood up to give a standing ovation to a fascist. This is what has happened to the conservative movement in this country. And listen to Orban's call to action to all his American fans in Dallas today.
You have midterm elections this year, then presidential and congressional elections in 24. And we will have election in the European Parliament same year. These two locations will define the two fronts in the battle being fought for Western civilization.
Let's be clear. Viktor Orban's definition of Western civilization is white people. Remember, no race mixing. And Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell of California even went so far as to tweet this, quote, "They are applauding a man who denounced mixing races. They might as well be wearing white sheets at this point." Republicans, of course, always claim they are not talking about race. They say they are not racists. But they just use coded language to get around saying the obvious racist words. And now they have no defense for inviting a purveyor of racism and of fascism to their conference in...
I mean, my perspective is you look at the demographics of the country and they're just like the white population is just skyrocketing, nosediving downwards. I mean, are we obligated to like see all of... And I don't want to get in trouble for saying that. I don't want to get in trouble for finishing that thought, but it's like, are we obligated to give the country away completely? Because, yeah, the white population is like starting to get pretty close to dipping down below 50%. And like, is anybody allowed to acknowledge it? Is anybody allowed to like say anything about it? And I don't know. That's all I'll say about it because I don't want another hate speech or another hate speech strike.
In Dallas. They are literally hosting and cheering for a man who gives speeches using Nazi rhetoric. This is truly taking it to a new and dangerous level, normalizing and mainstreaming fascism. But it is coming from the party that is also producing mini-fascists who are cropping up on the state level all over the country. Several of them were on the ballot in Arizona this week, including Blake Masters, the Republican nominee for Senate, and Kari Lake, Republican candidate for governor. They both want to imprison Dr. Fauci, they say, although they never even bother to explain why. Just lock him up. And it only gets wilder from there.
I want to lock somebody down, and it's that liar, Dr. Fauci. It's time to take a sledgehammer to the mainstream media's lies and propaganda. Day one, I take my hand off the Bible, giving the oath of office, and we declare an invasion on our southern border. And then we're going to blow up the drug tunnels. And I don't care if there's a narco-terrorist in there when we do it. This next election, if you're caught cheating...
Based woman hype.
When I'm governor, there's not going to be a slap on the wrist. We're going after people.
Kari Lake is one of many Republicans.
I see your based black man, and I raise you a based woman.
On the ballot this year, who also deny the 2020 election results. Mark Fincham, Republican candidate for Secretary of State in Arizona, is an election denier. He's an election denier. So is Christina Caramo, Republican nominee for Secretary of State in Michigan, and Tudor Dixon, Republican nominee for governor of Michigan. There is Eric Schmidt, Missouri's Republican nominee for Senate, Diego Morales, Republican nominee for Secretary of State in Indiana, and Doug Mastriano, the Republican nominee for governor in Pennsylvania, plus Wes Allen, Republican nominee for Secretary of State in Alabama, Adam Laxalt, the Republican nominee for Senate in Nevada, and Jim Marchant, Nevada's Republican nominee for Secretary of State, all election deniers. They don't believe in liberal democracy. And so today, in 2022, I'm sorry to say, the Republican playbook is the Viktor Orban playbook. And you can call that what you want, but I'm going to continue to call it fascism.
Yeah, guys, so my take here, which is a lot of people don't like this take, dude. And sometimes I even watch these people. It's like, damn, that's based. Something really based is coming. But it's going to be kind of like a repeat of World War II, where it's funny because people roll their eyes when they say these people are fascists. People roll their eyes when they say Trump is literally Hitler. But I think the point of the insufferable radical left is to awaken the reactionary right, to get people to go all in on these kind of borderline authoritarian entities in the right. And, you know, I was in a thread in Poll last night, and we were talking about glows. We were talking about intelligence officers, and somebody was saying, you know, who's really CIA is people like Alex Jones, Donald Trump, Joe Rogan, and all of the other Republicans. And there's a couple of people that's like, oh man, you're getting like way too close to the truth. This thread's going to get pruned. Like, the CIA is in the Republican Party, guys. They want you to embrace the Republican Party. The reality is that the country is not your friend, and this is where I become a radical, and this is where it's like, you're anti-American, and yeah, guys, I mean, it's ugly. I want to have faith in our government. I do. I want to think that there's some good boys. I want to think there's some people who got our back. I want to think our guys are in office, but I just think they're not, and I think a big, giant authoritarian boot is going to stomp on your face when this is all said and done. So it's brutal, man. Like, I have trouble even saying it. It's like, I want to be like, based. Dude, United States is going to get so based. No race mixing, based. No abortion, based. It's just not gonna it's just not gonna be what people want it to be. I guess this doesn't really have to do with the topic of domestic terrorism, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. A couple of comments here. Excellent commentary. Nailed it a dozen different ways. Yeah, the left sucks, dude. The left sucks. I mean, it's just all a trap. It's all a trap, but yeah, the left sure sucks. Okay, here we go. January 6th Capitol rioter faces 15-year sentence after domestic terrorism conviction.
Now to the Justice Department's investigation into the January 6th riot, a Texas extremist group member who tried to enter the Capitol.
Part of me thinks right-leaning centrism is the realistic path. Yeah, I see what you're saying, man, because all these bootlickers are going to like embrace these far-right authoritarian regimes, and then we'll get a big old boot up our ass. So, yeah, you might be right there.
With a gun is expected to be sentenced today after being convicted on 5 felony counts. Prosecutors are arguing for an especially long sentence for crimes they're calling domestic terrorism. NBC News justice and legal correspondent Ken Delanian has been following the case for us. Good morning, Ken. So the DOJ has made more than 800 arrests related to January 6th, but this, quite notably, is the first case they've officially labeled as domestic terrorism. So how does that change the sentence that will be handed down later today?
Good morning, Zinkley. Well, it makes it potentially longer. This is called the domestic terrorism sentencing enhancement, and prosecutors have invoked it because they said, in this case, Guy Reffitt, this 49-year-old former Texas oil worker, intended to influence and coerce the workings of government for a political motive. Now, a lot of people might think many people on January 6th had that intent, but this is the first time the Justice Department has tried to apply this in sentencing. And what they are asking for is a 15-year sentence, which would be 3 times as long as the longest sentence handed down so far in any January 6th case of 5 years. And that was for somebody who assaulted police officers. So Guy Reffitt's attorneys understandably are saying, wait a second, our client didn't even enter the Capitol, didn't assault police officers. Why the long sentence recommendation? Prosecutors say, look, he had a gun with him. He threatened his children when they talked about turning him into the FBI. He showed no remorse whatsoever, even after he was convicted. And only recently did he send a letter to the judge expressing regret for his actions. So prosecutors really trying to throw the book here at Guy Reffitt today.
That's very intense, 3 times as long. And I know that this is also the first January 6th case to go to trial after Guy turned down a plea deal. So what did you learn about how the DOJ plans to prosecute the more than 300 defendants outside of Guy who are choosing to take their cases to trial?
The Justice Department certainly trying to send a strong message here that acceptance of responsibility by pleading guilty is a big issue. And now Refet's attorneys argue, look, you can't penalize my client for seeking his constitutional right to a trial. But prosecutors say in their court briefs that Refet, these other people who got 5-year sentences, some of them pleaded guilty and admitted their responsibility. And in a case like this, which has such political overtones, and many millions of people in the country still believe that January 6th was justified, the Justice Department really wants to send a message here, wants these defendants to admit that they were wrong. And if they do not do that, it really looks like the penalties they're seeking are much higher.
And Ken, quickly, you talked about political undertones. Along with prosecuting the actual January 6 rioters, the DOJ is also running separate probes into so-called fake elector schemes and conspiracy to obstruct Congress, from certifying that 2020 election. So how are the Justice Department and the Attorney General Garland balancing all of these high-profile investigations?
This is a tough one, Zinkley. The investigation that could involve former President Trump and his inner circle, that's the most important investigation, arguably, in Justice Department history. And the very top people of the Justice Department are thinking deeply about questions such as whether to prosecute a former president. Then you've also got this sprawling January 6th related investigation where, as you said, more than 850 arrested. They think that as many as 2,500 people enter the Capitol. So they still have a long way to go if they want to prosecute everyone who entered the building. And there's some real questions about whether they have the resources to do this. The FBI seems overwhelmed in some cases, according to our reporting, but they're trying to juggle all that. And we have a lot still to look forward to in these investigations and these prosecutions, Sinclair.
Definitely. We know you'll keep us posted. Ken Delanian, thank you.
Thanks for watching our
Yep, Andy Dick's got a little cameo in Reality Bites. Old school, man. 1994. Super cozy year. That was probably Ben Stiller's first movie, I think. Maybe his first popular movie. I can't remember when Something About Mary came out. I think that's before Something About Mary. Oh, Baked Alaska and Dope District still not in prison. Trust the plan, by the way. Thing is, guys, is that most of these people who are in the January 6th thing, they got seduced, man. Just a bunch of those people who are based, Pepe the Frog, dude, meme magic. Oh, dude, we're gonna we memed this, dude. LMAO, we memed ourselves into the Capitol building. What the? Just a bunch of dumb 4chaners who just got memed into doing something dumb by feds. And it's yeah, once you enter that building, it's yikes, dude, you guys really fucked up. You guys fucked up, bro. But there's the footage of that guy who's we need to go into the Capitol. He's just some big, he's like the meme, dude. He's like the glow meme, just some big fucking guy who looks completely out of place. We need to go into the Capitol. It's and then everybody was chanting, Fed, Fed, Fed. Baked Alaska was calling him a Fed. 5 minutes later, and then they all went inside the building. So, honeypot, boys, that is just the primo honeypot, and everybody fell for it. And yeah, this was absolutely planned. And what is it? What is it serving for? Just a number of things. I think a lot of it served as a distraction from COVID. Giving something to everybody to puff their chests about. There was a terrorist attack. That was we almost lost our democracy. They wanted to overthrow our country and our democracy. Dude, it's a bunch of dumb kids. We did it. We memed ourselves into the Capitol building. LMAO. We're doing it, bro. Yeah. Dude, it reminds me of Trailer Park Boys. It could be an episode of Trailer Park Boys. Corey and Trevor. We did it, man. We're in the Capitol building. I don't know, Corey. I think we shouldn't have listened to Ricky this time. Dude, what are you talking about, man? We're totally cool now. You fucked up, boys. And then Ricky sells them out to the cops. Yeah, these guys are domestic terrorists or whatever. And I told Corey and Trevor not to go in there, but they did anyway. Anyway, yeah, man, it was some bullshit. Don't ever trust an old man who wears spray tan and is the greatest grifter of all time. I don't know, man. There's a lot of good grifters out there. Justice matters. Without justice, there can be no peace. I think maybe Alex Jones is the greatest grifter of all time. But he's so great that it's hard for people to hear that. He's funny. He's a funny guy. Imagine facing 15 years in prison because you acted on the blatantly obvious lies of a con man who used you like a puppet. Just wow. Hell yeah, the Goonies is cozy. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. I'm trying to remember what song. Your love is good enough. Why, yeah, 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 yeah. It's got that Cyndi Lauper song in it. Yeah, the first time I saw Goonies, I was like, whoa, this is like a mystical, magical adventure. One-Eyed Willie. Heard this for months now, as much as 20 years. Then they get probation and run for Senate. There's nobody following me, dude. Not lately. Your cope, they're telling me yesterday, like, we noticed you didn't make eye contact with the big boys driving by you. Like, dude, you're just trying to get me to make eye contact with, like, random drivers on the road, bro. All right, moving on. DOJ creates new task force to combat domestic terrorism. Let's scope.
On this charge of seditious conspiracy for their role in the January 6th attack, what does this tell you about where the DOJ's probe is headed?
This confirms that Merrick Garland meant what he said at his address on January 5th in Main Justice, when he indicated that he was willing to go after people at every level, whether they were actually at the events at the Capitol on the 6th or not. And the most important detail in this indictment, frankly, Alicia, is the fact that it doesn't treat January 6th as a one-day event. This goes back to events that start contemporaneously with the election. It ends with events after the January 6th insurrection itself. It shows that DOJ is, in fact, looking at all of the events that occurred in the effort to block the confirmation of Joe Biden as the winner of the electoral vote. So I think this suggests that DOJ really will make good on Garland's commitment to engage in a robust investigation of everyone who is involved. Obviously, the goal, one of the goals with an indictment like this, is to flip some of these defendants to see if there's an opportunity to have them cooperate against other people who were involved. And typically when you do that, you're working up the ladder, trying to reach people who are more culpable.
Malcolm, the DOJ said the defendants plan to organize into teams and were, quote, prepared and willing to use force and to transport firearms into Washington, D.C. I want you to talk about the plan here as you understand it and describe for us, if you would, what might have happened had they actually been able to pull this off.
You know, a lot of operational planning with Stuart Rhodes and other people took place well before the election. In fact, he made a statement on his internal communications, which a lot of which we saw, many counterterrorism analysts saw in real time playing out, well, as you saw on InfoWars and other forums. But they had started training in October in the run-up to the election, with many of these members coming together in the criminal conspiracy that was executed on the 5th and the 6th. By election day, he had made it very clear that he intended to wage war, and actually use the word insurgency, against the United States. And so on many platforms, he did that and organized it. By December 12th, the first major protest in D.C., he was coordinating with the Proud Boys and 3% militia in order to get hundreds of people there. Not to mention, he put out the national call to all of the Oath Keepers, most of whom are military, ex-military, and police, and gave them instructions on where to bring body armor, helmets, riot gear, sticks, pepper spray, weapons. And then he coordinated this quick reaction force that was supposed to be in Northern Virginia, we now know was in the area of Manassas at a hotel, where they had staged all their weapons and were intending to get into D.C. in 7 minutes by car or get a boat and land heavy firearms there once they had taken the Capitol. What's the difference between what we saw last year and what's happening in Texas right now? The only difference is the gunman in Texas has his hostages. All throughout the day, I warned that there could have been very specific capture and kill teams seated amongst those rioters. And it turns out there were individuals coming to take hostages and kill. And if it wasn't for officers like Eugene Goodman, who directed Mitt Romney away, and personal security details that secured everyone, this could have ended very, very badly.
Joyce, one of the things that I think about as I watch the InfoWars clip is that it wasn't as though Rhodes was doing all of this on the DL. He was announcing his intention on multiple broadcasts. He's a law school grad. He ostensibly understands some of the finer points of the law. Could that then complicate his defense of his own involvement?
Inevitably, it's going to complicate his defense, because one of the things that he's maintained, and he voluntarily submitted to an FBI interview over the summer, and he said, I'm a Yale-educated lawyer. I know where the lines are. Of course, I would have never done anything illegal. And he said that he had stayed away from the Capitol, that he didn't actually enter the Capitol itself on the 6th, as though that somehow insulates him from criminal liability. But the charges that he faces are charges of a conspiracy. And that is that's a common sense crime, right? We all understand that it involves an agreement to achieve an illegal end. And here we have him on videotape showing that he's acknowledging that he's involved in the planning of those events. I think this is spectacular evidence for prosecutors to have in hand. He's looking at a minimum of 20 years in prison, or rather, I should say a statutory maximum of 20 years in prison. Even though guideline sentences are lower, there's a lot of violence involved, and he's a leader and a planner here. He'll be facing significant time. He'll have a lot of incentive to cooperate with prosecutors.
Malcolm, I have one more question for you, and that is just who is paying for all of this? I mean, when you look at all the gear that they had, when you think about who's actually at the center of power here, who's paying for all of that?
Well, a lot of these people pay for it themselves. You know, you see them all dressed up in the body armor, what we call the tactical tuxedo, trying to outdo each other in the combat fashion show. This is what we call those posers, right? These are guys who are live action role playing. But you have to understand, there were many groups that sent the Oath Keepers money. The Oath Keepers was collecting tens of thousands of dollars. They were getting donations everywhere. There are other groups out there like, Code of Vets, another group affiliated with General Michael Flynn. Michael Flynn gave them $100,000 last year. The fake election lawyer, Sidney Powell, she gave them $10,000. There are individuals and millionaires out there that give these groups money.
Yep, and a lot of the big funders of this had every intention of it being a flop. They wanted the exact outcome that came of this. There was never going to be a takeover of the White House. It was meant to be a boomer horror story. Oh, my democracy. We almost lost our democracy. Meanwhile, all our rights are being taken away during COVID. And everything about COVID is a sham. And everybody's like, my democracy, we're going to lose my... Hold on, I got to go get my 5th booster shot. Okay, there we go. But democracy almost went away. Yeah. This thing was funded. Oath Keepers, fraternal orders take oaths. Oath Keepers are like in the ballpark of like a Freemasonry type of deal. They're like a fraternal order.
They are now part, the Oath Keepers I'm speaking of specifically, all of them are now tainted with the brush of criminal.
Well, we want to see the plan, guys. It's just like watching movies. Like, as an intellectual, you're like, I don't watch movies anymore. I just read books. And then as you keep going down the rabbit hole, it's like, you could learn something about the plot for the New World Order by watching a fucking Seth Rogen movie. Like, seriously. You can see the plan in television. You can see it, predictive programming, hidden hand, revelation of method. You see this stuff in television, and you see it on the news as well. So, yeah, I'm not, like, showing this to you guys like, oh, we almost lost our democracy. Like, this was a key playing chip for them. This was a chess move. They needed something to kvetch about, and they got it. And that's ultimately what a lot of people were funding. It's exactly what they got.
Conspiracy to overthrow the government of the United States. So all these guys who are outlying and, meeting up at Denny's in Idaho and even parts up here in upstate New York, they are now going to have to understand their leadership took part in this and organized it.
Leadership. They did it. They organized it. Trying to outdo each other in the tactical gear fashion show. Hilarious. Yeah, I could tell you were joking, bro. Like, these people would have got absolutely decimated by whatever kind of military forces they got near the Capitol building. If they would just indict the instigators, there would be no need. Remember, the calls from inside the White House. Can't wait to pop the popcorn for the day of his trial. 20 to life, baby. Let's go. Is this a girl saying this? Wait. What? Who? Never mind. I don't know. I feel like that's Transformer robots in disguise. Have them arrested and placed in a cell. All who refuse a congressional subpoena. Yeah, and now just like boomers are just like vicariously living through the lock them up, baby. Yeah, lock them up. People are just like really getting into this, dude. This is just something for people to just really sink their teeth into. I think Harvard and Yale need to review their candidates a little bit better. I haven't been very impressed with some of the Harvard and Yale grads lately. What's their motto? Anything for money? Well, I heard one guy got into Harvard by just writing Black Lives Matter over and over and over and over again for his for his acceptance letter or for his entry letter or whatever. Shouldn't Flynn be charged with aiding and abetting? Those Oath Keepers must have thought they'd be protected due to the involvement of Man Baby. Is that supposed to be Trump? Man Baby. DOJ, please hold these people accountable. Lock them up, boys. Good job, boys. Lock them up. We did it. We saved democracy. We saved the world. This was a huge, real event that was really real, and it really mattered. And pay no attention to the floating Jesuit head behind the curtain. Anyway, I don't have all the answers to all these things, guys, but it's been a wild and wacky couple of years. Big stuff has been going down. Domestic terrorism on the rise. So, whoa, this was October 9th, 2020. Let's just go ahead and see what's going on in this throwback. Near the end of 2020, so we were already in COVID times here.
Domestic terrorism is on the rise across the country. The plot to kidnap Governor Whitmer is the latest in a string of crimes, all tied to an anti-government movement. 7 investigator Heather Catallo joins us live now with a look at what she has uncovered. Heather?
Well, Carolyn, this movement has a really weird name, the Boogaloo, but don't let that fool you. Experts say this movement is downright dangerous. Violence is on the rise across the U.S. from far-right extremist groups.
This is not a militia. It is a domestic...
Oh, is this the Boogaloo Boys? Dude, the Boogaloo Boys was so funny, dude. That's like the most glowing thing that ever exists. We're the Boogaloo Boys again, dude. Like people who are just like way bigger. They just look like big fucking trained military guys advertising a fortune. Yeah, Pepe the Frog. Who wants to be a Boogaloo Boy? Psh, over. They're falling for it. Over. That's such a freaking honeypot.
Domestic terror organization. We need to call it out.
Law enforcement officials say the 13 men arrested as part of the plot to...
Let's see who looks like feds. This guy looks like a fed. This guy looks like a fed. This guy maybe looks like a fed. The Boogaloo Boys, let's go! Let's go, 4chan! Let's start the boog!
Kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer and attack the state capitol have ties to something called the Boogaloo movement.
It is primarily an anti-government movement that wants to incite violence at these protests we've seen recently. It wants to, engage in violent acts and bring about the collapse of society.
John Lewis researches extremism at George Washington University.
It's a fragmented, disparate set of individuals. Anyone can join. I can go put on a Hawaiian shirt in my closet and say I'm a member of the Boogaloo movement.
The term boogaloo comes from the 1984 movie Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo. Lewis says it roughly translates into a bad sequel, snowballing on the dark web into a term for a second civil war.
What that became 6 to 8, 10 months ago was it started developing a more offline identity, which is important. So it moved from that online meme-based 4chan space to offline at protests with the Hawaiian shirt and the plate armor and the AR-15.
So this is just one of the angles you can look at this. The government does not like 4chan, you guys. I found like a really impressive list of shill tactics yesterday, like how they slide threads, how they utilize. It's actually teaching you how to like use fallacies strategically to try to just derail conversations. And ultimately, you find a lot of people who say they grew out of 4chan pull, and I've been there. It's like, I am now officially too smart to be a part of 4chan pull. And then 6 months goes by or a year goes by, and you're like, okay, ultimately there's not really like anything better than this that I know of as far as like free discussion. So you just be more selective with what kind of threads you post in, and you still end up finding like probably the cutting edge of critical thinking discussions as far as like trying to figure out what exactly the globalists are doing or what exactly the government's doing. And they're looking for excuses to tie those spaces to domestic terrorism. Now, the thing is, it's a containment board, so they would never really want to take it down. They want to keep it up, because if it goes down, then they'll look for other places. These people will try to find another place to gather. These people are always going to exist and gather somewhere. They want to keep this space up, but they want it regulated, stagnated, tarred and feathered, labeled as domestic terrorists. They're just trying to make things difficult for this uncontrolled section of the internet that ultimately is going to take some great care in the process of taming and figuring out how to control and dominate.
Law enforcement sources say 11 of the 13 men are associated with a militia group called the Wolverine Watchmen. Michigan has a long history.
You know, somebody who just took a hate speech strike, that's not anything that's going to be happening anytime soon. I mean, if I very carefully, I could like find a segment or something, but yeah, I don't know about that.
With militias. But sources tell the 7 investigators that other legal militia groups consider the 13 suspects as very much on the fringe.
So the Boogaloo threat is in ways separate and distinct, but I think what we're seeing now in the United States under this broader umbrella of what I call far-right terrorism, you've got different strands. You've got sort of militia groups, you've got Boogaloo, you've got white supremacists, you've got neo-Nazis, and sometimes they stay in their own worlds or their own lanes, and sometimes they cross over.
Javed Ali spent 16 years in counterterrorism and intelligence in the federal government and was on President Trump's National Security Council.
Let's flip and glow it.
Until 2018. He says the current political climate is prompting more extremist groups to act out.
It's the pandemic, it's the protests, and it's politics.
Now, you may have noticed these suspects are not charged with federal domestic terrorism. That's because there is no such law, and experts say there really needs to be some better policy to help with cases.
Oh, yeah, you know what? I'm glad we watched this, guys. Back in 2020, man, these guys should really be convicted, but there's no domestic terrorism policy. We're going to have to get on that. I guess we have to. Well, the Boogaloo Boys, who is clearly an organic movement, not created by any sort of federal agency, well, we're going to need to change that legislature. We're going to need to pass some laws. See what's going on, guys? It's all an excuse. They fabricate radical movements. They rope people into this stuff so that they can change policy and so that they can walk us off this plank towards the future where we lose our freedoms, you guys. And I'm in this weird place where I've spent a lot of time talking about how degenerate libertarianism is, but ultimately they do want an authoritarian regime that can just deal with us. You know, they want to deal with the freedom movement or whatever you want to call it. They want to deal with the real critical thinkers. They're either going to want legislation that works in their favor, and they don't really need an authoritarian system. You know, they can just create these policies in our so-called democracy, and they'll figure out a way to get the job done, man. I feel like different systems of government are just different sets of tools and different methods of getting to where you want to go. They're going to get us there. They've come a long way over these last almost 2 years since this came out.
Like this. Reporting live, I'm Heather Catallo, 7 Action News.
All right. Thank you so much, Heather. Domestic terror.
All right. Let's see. Some old comments. This aged like fine wine a year ago. How is this any different than what just happened? Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. Quoting Joe Biden. Anyone see where this is going? How did Turbo and Ozone get caught in this? Okay. Needs more diverse representation. Can the state sponsor POC to do some mass murders? Like, I got nothing left. Can I apply? What are you talking about? They are not charged because they haven't done anything wrong. The Boogaloo Boys. They didn't do anything wrong. It's damn Boogaloo Boys. All right. Closing up our segment on domestic terrorism with this little article here. Ooh, Tops. That place looks cozy. I want to go to Tops. Toppies. All right. More mass shootings are happening at grocery stores. 13% of shooters are motivated by racial hatred. Criminologists find. May 15th, 2022. So this is theconversation.com. An apparently racially motivated attack at a supermarket in Buffalo, New York resulted in 10 deaths on May 14th, 2022. I'm sure we all remember that. I'm sure some of us allegedly saw the footage of that. I might have allegedly seen the footage of that live stream in Minecraft. With the teenage suspect allegedly targeting black shoppers in a prominently African-American neighborhood. Mass public shootings in which 4 or more people are killed have become more frequent and deadly in the last decade. And the tragedy in Buffalo is the latest in a recent trend of mass public shootings taking place in retail establishments. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I read a lot of this guy's manifesto as well. I mean, y'all know what I want to say about it. Some sort of, like, plant, some sort of brainwashed mind control victim. I mean, this shit is convenient for them. It starts by understanding how these things are convenient for their plan. This all works in favor of the legislature they want, and I don't know, man. Like, what the hell is the deal with these mass shooters? Are these just genuinely angry people, or is this something artificial? And you might point out that I can't prove it. Well, our government has access to some pretty incredible technology and tactics and techniques and funding, and a good place to start is McGowan's book on the serial killers. Or you could even read, I'm going to read the Henry Lee Lucas book, Hand of Death. He said he was in some freaking cult called the Hand of Death, where there was like military facilities that were training people how to kill, and there was like ties to kidnapping and trafficking and really, really ugly things, ritual murder that looked like it was under the wings. It was like contained inside of some sort of a government operation. So a lot of people just say, oh, Henry Lee Lucas is nuts and you can't listen to what he says, but he was pardoned by the president. You start with the serial killers, and then maybe you think, okay, if you think that maybe the serial killers was some sort of a government MK Ultra op, are the school shooters one as well? We're just thinking here. Don't give me a strike. We're just having conversations, allegedly. And in conclusion to my opinion on Minecraft, that is my favorite episode of Minecraft. Okay, we are criminologists who study the life histories of public mass shooters in the United States. Since 2017, we have conducted dozens of interviews with incarcerated perpetrators and people who knew them. We also built a comprehensive database of mass public shootings using public data, with the shooters coded on over 200 different variables, including location and racial profile. What do we know about supermarket mass shootings? Only one shooting in our database prior to 2019 took place at a supermarket. In 1999, a 23-year-old white male with a history of criminal violence killed 4 people at a supermarket in Las Vegas. However, there has been a raft of mass shootings at American supermarkets since. Buffalo shooting on May 14, 2022, is similar to an August 2019 shooting at a Walmart in El Paso, Texas. On that occasion, the 21-year-old white suspect posted a racist rant on social media before allegedly driving some distance to intentionally target racial and ethnic minority shoppers. He has been charged with killing 23 people. Wow. Wow, man. That's crazy. Another shooting in 2019 took place at a kosher grocery store in Jersey City, New Jersey. 2 perpetrators, a man and woman, both black, okay? Black people, let's go. And around the age of 50. Black boomers, with a criminal and violent history, murdered 4 people before being killed in a shootout with police. Social media posts and a note left behind indicated an anti-Semitic motive. Then, in March 2021, a 21-year-old man of Middle Eastern descent with a history of paranoid and antisocial behavior entered a King Soopers in Boulder, Colorado, and shot dead 10 people. 6 months later, in September 2021, a 29-year-old Asian man killed 1 person and injured 13 others at a Kroger supermarket in Tennessee. The perpetrator, who worked at the store, was asked to leave his job that morning. He died by suicide before the police arrived on the scene. No one profile of a retail shooter. Mass shootings are socially contagious. Perpetrators study other perpetrators and learn from each other, which may explain the rise in supermarket shootings in the past few years. However, the data shows there is no one profile of a supermarket mass shooter. Racial hatred is a feature of about 10% of all mass public shootings in our database. Our analysis suggests that when it comes to retail shooters, around 13% are driven by racism, so slightly above the average for all mass shooting events. Some grocery stores, by their nature, may be frequented predominantly by one racial group. For example, Asian markets that cater to local Asian communities. But racial hatred appears to be just one of many motivations cited by retail shooters. Our data points to a range of factors, including the suspect's own economic issues, 16%, confrontation with employees or shoppers, 22%, or psychosis, 31%. But the most common motivation among retail shooters is unknown, 34%. And it's not like those numbers are objective. Like the Buffalo shooter, 22% of perpetrators of retail mass shootings left behind something to be found, a manifesto or video to share their grievances with the world. And nearly half of them leaked their plans ahead of time, typically on social media. The lack of a consistent profile doesn't leave us helpless. Our research suggests many strategies to prevent mass shootings, from behavioral threat assessment to restricting access to firearms for high-risk people. And the way to stop the social contagion of mass shootings is to stop providing perpetrators with the fame and notoriety they seek. Well, that will never happen, I'll tell you that much. Yeah, ultimately, guys, it plays to their benefit. They get what they're looking for with this stuff. Top shooting was glowing like the sun. It's too convenient, creepy. You're not allowed to think about that one. Ask Alex Jones. Yep. There was a foiled shooting attempt at a Washington State rave recently. Interesting. I'll have to look into that. All right, guys. Well, we're about to pass the hour-and-a-half mark, which is, a decent amount of time for a regular podcast. So it looks like we made it. The Millennium. So the Millennium in theology is the 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth. Some people aren't familiar with all of these details. They know about the apocalypse. You hear the trumpet blow, and then Christ comes, and there's going to be a tribulation leading to the return of Christ. This is actually something a little bit new to me. Is at the very end of my systematic theology I was reading from Wayne Grudem. It does talk about Christ coming back and reigning for 1,000 years with an iron rod. Like, Christ will return and will be king. And it's interesting. It suggests that Satan will be tossed into a bottomless pit, and then he'll escape again after 1,000 years, and there will be a big war between the rebellion led by Satan. So ultimately, like, this is before resurrection, I think. Or no, I think there will be a resurrection. It's a little bit confusing. But anyway, there's premillennialism, postmillennialism, and amillennialism. Here we have the door saying, who are the people on earth during the millennium? So I think we're just going to go ahead and wrap up with this little video. If nothing else, it can kind of like pique your interest on the subject of the millennium in theology. And let's go.
All right, here's a question from one of our readers. I am Michael Pearl here at the door. This question: who are the people of the earth during the millennium which are ruled by the saved? Where or when do they come forth? He's speaking of 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ upon the earth, predicted, the first prediction was 5,500 years ago by a guy named Enoch. And it was prophesied by David, prophesied by Ezekiel and Isaiah especially, and Jesus prophesied of it. And then Paul spoke of it, and finally Peter spoke of it, and then John, the Revelator, wrote quite a bit about this millennial reign of Christ upon the earth. The world has captured that word millennium, and is using it to try to divest it of its scriptural realities. But we still understand we are what the Bible calls pre-millennialist. That means we are going to get raptured out prior to the millennium and come back to the earth to reign with Christ for 1,000 years. Now here's the passage, or one of them he's referring to. Matthew 25:31. When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory. Talking about the earth. And before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, the nations, as a shepherd divideth his sheep from his goats. And he shall set the sheep on the right hand and the goats on the left. And then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Now that's an extremely clear prophecy that Jesus is going to come back to the earth with his angels and with other passages set up his throne in Jerusalem in the holy place of the rebuilt temple. And there the nations will come once a year at the Feast of Tabernacles to worship. And they'll bring their sacrifices and their gifts and their offerings, and they will celebrate. If the nations do not send a delegation, not everyone has to come, but a delegation, fanfare for the different nations. If they don't send a delegation, say Iraq or Egypt. In fact, he says if Egypt decides not to come down, I'll withhold rain from them. So it's a very serious business during the millennial reign of Christ. Now he says, Ye are they which continue with me in my temptations. I appoint unto you a kingdom, Jesus said to the disciples, as my Father hath appointed unto me, that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom. Jesus is going to eat and drink during the millennium. See, it's a natural body. He comes back in a glorified natural body, eating and drinking. That you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom and sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So the 12 apostles are going to sit on.
So what's up, Esoteric? Glad to hear that, man. Yeah, boy, I was like I felt like I took melatonin last night or something. It was a little bit hard for me to get out of bed today. I did manage to get up before 1 p.m., some of the gritty details of my life, but honestly, I feel like part of it's being a drummer. Like if I woke up super early, if I woke up at like 6 a.m., my drumming time that I've agreed with my neighbor on isn't till 2 p.m. So if I sleep into 12 p.m., which is like being a piece of shit for most people, that means I can be up for like a couple of hours and drink my coffee and hang out before I play drums. If I wake up super early, then there's just like hours and hours and hours until I play drums. They say you want to do some of your most important stuff like in the first few hours of your day. So I think it kind of makes sense for drummers to sleep in personally if you have like sanctions on when you can play. I had one of my recurring dreams last night where I'm late for school. Dude, this is a recurring dream I have all the time. I'm back in like elementary school or high school. I'm pretty sure it was high school. I'm back in high school and I wake up and I'm eating my breakfast and I'm watching the time. I'm watching the clock. It's like, oh man, it's almost 8:30. Like I got to get to school. I'm going to be late. I have this dream like every 6 months or something, and it always kind of stresses me out, and just the clock is ticking like I'm going to be late. Something about being late, something about not making it in time. Yeah, but anyway, good on you, man. Keep up that Bible study.
On thrones. There won't be a Senate or a House or a presidency, just be a king. And the disciples will be kings, and they will be benevolent rulers, and they will rule over the 12 tribes. All of them are Jews, and it's appropriate that they should rule over the 12 tribes during the 1,000-year reign of Christ upon the earth.
Wow. Let's hear that again. The Jews are going to rule over the 12 tribes. This is interesting. I mean, this is just this guy's perspective. Yeah, this is kind of a latest topic for me is the millennium. I haven't really gotten into this. Rick says that amillennialism is the Augustinian view. So maybe we'll try to get a quick video on amillennialism after this.
Will be kings, and they will be benevolent rulers, and they will rule over the 12 tribes. All of them are Jews, and it's appropriate that they should rule over the 12 tribes during the 1,000-year reign of Christ upon the earth. Now in Luke 19:17, he said unto them, well done, thou good servant, because thou hast been faithful in a little, have thou authority over 10 cities. So saints, those of us alive right now, the church, Christians, are raptured out, and some of us are given to rule over cities. Some are not. Some, the Bible said, will be saved so as by fire. That means you miss the fire, and that's all you get. You just kind of sit back there, son. You don't get to participate.
The millennium is the 1,000-year reign of Christ. This is all about like eschatology, the end of the world, second coming of Christ, all of that.
Just when you worship, come on up, but you don't get no ruling, no reigning. Keep your mouth shut. So there's some Christians that are just going to make it in, and that's all. It's going to take, they have to go through remedial class, you know. But others, he's going to say, you've been faithful over a little bit, 2 cities for you. You've been faithful over a whole lot, 10 cities for you, 5 cities for you. And so you'll have to have some subordinates under you.
That was for chicken. I could see right off the bat. That's for chicken. He took a big L yesterday.
Ruling over 10 cities. Now, probably the best I'll get would be Pleasantville. It doesn't have a bank or a gas station or a place to eat. No officers, just a bunch of trailers on the highway. But I'll be glad for that. It's time to straighten out Pleasantville. That place is in a bad shape. So maybe we'll, I don't know. I'll be glad to get in by the skin of my teeth. I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord than dwell in the tents of the wickedness, the psalmist said. Now, 1 Corinthians 6:1, dare any of you having a matter against another go to law before the unjust and not before the saints? Do you not know that the saints shall judge the world? Did you know that out there in TV land? Did you know that the Christians right now are going to be the judges of this world? People say, why are you judging me? And if the world shall be judged by you, are you unworthy to judge the smallest matters? The problem was the Christians were failing to judge. That was the big problem. You know, you need to pass some judgment. I pass judgment on abortionists. I don't kill abortionists. I wouldn't kill anybody. That's between them and God. I don't hate abortionists. I just pass judgment on them as evil, wicked, godless people. I pass judgment on sodomites, queers. They are contrary to the will of God. I pass judgment on Disney for their movies that they make that damage and spoil children. I pass judgment.
He said Disney. I kind of screwed that up. Yeah, he passes judgment on Disney for spoiling children.
On the dope heads and on the politicians. I have a judgment about a lot of things that are evil in this world. The people who steal children. Now, take back that part about I wouldn't kill them. If I got a chance to, at somebody that's stealing and raping children, I would kill them. And so I pass judgment. I shouldn't, but I would. I pass judgment. You should too. If you don't judge, you're a worthless human being. Our whole government is set up to judge. There are judges everywhere. There are courts. There's laws that we must live by. There's penalties for breaking them. And God is a judge. He's a judge of all the earth. And the Bible said he will do justly. So there'll come a time when the Bible said he will judge the world. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and they'll stand there and he will open the books. Another book will be opened, which is the book of life, and the dead will be judged out of those things which are written in the books according to their works. He said the saints shall judge angels. If ye then have judgments of things pertaining to this life, set them to judge who are least esteemed in the church. He said in the church, when you have a judgment to make, pick out the most ignominious among you, those that are little known and little respected and don't amount to much. Let them make the judgments, because they're going to be judges later on. They need some practice. All right, Revelation 2:26. And he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations. The Bible is not just tooting some horn out in space. When it said he's going to give you power over the nations, he means that. This world is not just going to end and explode, and some people are going to heaven, some people go to hell, and the world's gone, you know, it's all over with. This earth, I'll create a new one, is going to be heaven. A new earth is going to be heaven. It's the heaven you're going to experience. And if you are born again, you need to enjoy the planet, because
Yeah, that's a good point. That I feel like stereotypically people think that heaven is like in the clouds or in the sky or in another dimension. No, the Bible's clear that, you know, the earth will be redone somehow, and like this will be heaven. Earth will become heaven.
You're going to get a new one. And I do. You ever been down to Cane Creek? Sun shining, breeze blowing, trees all green, and big old gray stork standing there catching birds, and eagle flies over, and fish jumping. Beautiful. I mean, God is an artist, first-class artist. And so I enjoy this world. I'm looking forward to the new one. All right. Power over the nations. And he shall rule them with a rod of iron. As the vessels of a potter shall they be broken in shivers, even as I received of my Father. Now that's scripture, folks. Going to rule with a rod of iron and break them into little splinters, those that are disobedient. That's how he's going to rule. Now, I know we live in a world that is very judgmental about judging and passes judgment against anybody who passes judgment. And they will condemn you. They'll burn you out. They'll knock holes in your car. They will set your place on fire. They'll write nasty letters. They'll come and stand in front of your house, and they'll call you all kinds of names if you dare pass judgment. But there's going to come a day when that's just not going to matter. It's not going to be Donald Trump at the top. It's going to be the Lord Jesus Christ. And he's going to have a rod of iron. And when you're disobedient and rebellious, and you've walked in sin, and pride, and you've been an adulterer, a thief, a liar, a fornicator, a dopehead, a drunkard, you will have your part in the lake of fire, and you'll meet with God's judgment. You need to repent while you have a chance, because there's wonderful forgiveness, wonderful love. He wipes away your complete record and makes a new creature out of you. It happened to me at 7:14 one night. It can happen to you too. Called The New Birth. Look at my series on Romans. It'll tell you everything you need to know. It's free, online.
All right. Well, this guy sounds like he's a little bit out there. You absolutely repent. Definitely do your best to repent of your known sins. But some people say that when you have the new birth, you will no longer sin. Like, I don't necessarily think that's what this guy was saying, but yeah. So this was premillennialism. Premillennialism is we get sucked up in the rapture during the tribulation, and then we return with Christ for his 1,000 reign on earth. Let's see if we can find amillennialism. Here we go. And then maybe we should try to fit in post-millennialism too, but I'm kind of looking for a short video. Amillennialism and why it's wrong. Okay. Well, we'll at least figure out what amillennialism is. We'll see what they say why it's wrong as well, I guess. My pastor and me were recently talking about this. He says that he's a pan-millennialist, where he says it's all going to pan out somehow, and he doesn't think that this is a covenant breaking. This isn't something that should sow division between churchgoers, and I kind of feel the same way. I currently don't really have a position on this, and it sounds like, he's somebody who graduated seminary, and he doesn't really have a position on this, and a little bit new to it.
Millennialism, one of the eschatological systems that, amongst other things, attempts to explain what is commonly known as the end times spoken of within the Bible. The amillennial position is a popular view in current day, and has attracted many well-known scholars into its halls. But is amillennialism the correct position? Is it biblical? No, and here's just one reason why. Amillennialists typically teach that the millennium, spoken of in Revelation 20, is a symbolic term that should be understood as meaning an unspecified amount of time, associated with our current age's completion and the stepping into the new heavens and the new earth God has promised is faithful. And, according to Amil supporters, we are currently within this thing known as the millennium and are awaiting the next step in God's plans, mainly the new heavens and the new earth. Now, because of this, certain elements attached to the millennium must logically be interpreted to suit this fundamental commitment. One of these elements is known as the binding of Satan. You see, in the book of Revelation, it's said that, along with the 1,000-year period of Christ ruling, or the millennium, that Satan himself is thrown into an abyss where he's held for 1,000 years. As such, amillennialists are logically obliged to explain how it is that Satan is bound and currently being held in the abyss, given that they believe that we're currently within the millennium. In other words, if we were in fact currently in the millennium, then it logically follows that Satan too must be bound and trapped within the abyss. So, what is their explanation for this binding? Well, amillennialists propose that when Christ died on the cross, that this is the work and moment that bound Satan up in the abyss. It was the work of Jesus on the cross that established a redemptive history which allowed the spread of the gospel to the nations to occur. It was at the cross that Jesus crushed the head of the serpent and disarmed principalities and powers, making a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them. Riddlebarger, a proponent of amillennialism, puts it this way. What this binding of Satan means is that, after the coming of the long-expected Messiah, Satan lost certain authority that he possessed prior to the life, death, burial, resurrection, and ascension of the Savior. It does not mean that all satanic operations cease during the millennial age, as many opponents of amillennialism mistakenly assume. And so, it is believed then that verses like John 12:31-32, Colossians 2:15, Hebrews 2:14-15, and even 1 John 3:8b, all of which speak of the operations, works, and authority of the devil being destroyed by Christ, all occurred as a result of the redemptive work on the cross. And this is what the amillennialists believe the binding of Satan refers to in Revelation 20. But if the binding of Satan refers to the redemptive work on the cross, then what does it mean that Satan is released in Revelation 27? And how can the redemptive work of Christ on the cross be reversed? Matt Waymeyer explains it like this. If the binding of Satan in Revelation 20 refers to Christ's work of redemption on the cross, the finished work of Christ turns out to be the unfinished work of Christ when Satan is released. For example, according to 1 John 3:8, Jesus came to break the dominating power of sin in the lives of those who believe in him. But if the victory over the devil in this verse is equated with the binding of Satan in Revelation 23, what does it mean that Satan is released in Revelation 27? How can the effects of this redemptive victory be reversed? Similarly, the victory of Christ over the devil in Hebrews 2:14-15 consists of Jesus redeeming sinners from the power of Satan and the fear of death. But if this victory is identified as the binding of Satan in Revelation 20, how can this act of deliverance be nullified when the devil is set free? Likewise, how can the casting out of Satan in John 12:31-32 be reversed? And how can Christ's triumph over the rulers of darkness in Colossians 2:15 be overturned? These passages, they must not describe the same act of divine judgment against Satan as what John describes in Revelation 20:1-3. To put this another way, our millennialists are in a bit of a pickle here. By affirming that the cross is the work that binds Satan, they unwittingly are affirming that at least some of the work of the cross can be undone. And by doing so, they call the entire gospel's certainty and even eternality into question. So, is the amillennial explanation biblical? Hardly. Thank you for watching this video.
Okay, so I'm starting to kind of get the simple idea here. Premillennialism, we are not in the millennium yet, and it's still coming. Amillennialism, we are in the millennium. And off the top of my head, that sounds strange. Like, to think that we are in the 1,000 year of Christ, to think we're in the 1,000-year reign of Christ right now. And yeah, all the positions tend to agree that it's not exactly 1,000 years. It's just a period. It's just a period, a long time period. Off the top of my head, that sounds like it doesn't make sense. Like, we're in the 1,000-year reign of Christ. But I'm just kind of getting into this. Let's go ahead and do post-millennial. Yeah. So I imagine this means that the millennium already happened? What is it? Post-millennialism? Yeah. Yeah, this is kind of new to me. A case for post-millennialism. Oh, and this is the Calvinist bro. Problems with amillennialism. That's what we just did. Okay, a case for post-millennialism.
You talked about how just the world, from the 60s has just been successful. You just mentioned.
I mean, to me, premillennial sounds like it makes the most sense off the top of my head.
That there's success in this agenda that they've been pushing, and they play the long game. And I can't help thinking, coming from, my previous theology, I was born in America in 1986. So along with anybody else raised in a typical American church, I was pre-mill, I watched the Left Behind series, and dispensational, couldn't tell you the word or spell it or pronounce it, still probably would struggle with.
The Left Behind series, I kind of wanted to check that out. The Left Behind series, that's some sort of a series about the tribulation and the rapture.
The spelling, to be fair, to be honest, but couldn't pronounce it, didn't know what it meant, but I was, there's so many, R.C. Sproul, everybody's a theologian, you're just either a good one or a bad one. And so, with my pre-mill eschatology and dispensational and two-kingdomism, I think a lot of Christians fall into that category, and it's no wonder, I just want to make a point of this real quick, but it's no wonder that the world keeps winning. And I think of Jesus, who commends the shrewd servant. And, he says, like, the sons of darkness are more shrewd than the sons of the light. And there's Christians need to, like, we we keep losing a lot of times. I mean, ultimately, Christ never loses. He's the head of the church. He's going to build his church and the gates of hell, right? So the church is an offensive weapon. It's not just the church will conserve. The church is the true progressive instrument of Christ, right? We're actually making progress. There's regressives, progressives, there's conservatives, and then there's us, the true progressives who are actually taking hills and advancing, and Christ is the head, and so we're going to succeed. But in moments, right? Because just like stocks, we're trending up, but there are dips along the way, and it feels like we've been in a little bit of a dip.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason there's a dip is because everything that we do and the way that we live, it stems from our theological dispositions. And I think part of the reason the world keeps winning is because the world seems to care more about the world than Christians do. Because it's all they have, and they know it, right? I mean, everything that you were listening is all rooted in atheism. This is it. YOLO, you only live once. It's this life. It's this stuff. It's all material. And Christians, we've had such a pie in the sky, such, to where, we look at Jeremiah, and we think of, as long as, the city prospers, if you prosper, the city prospers, work for the welfare of the city. And that's God's word to Israel as their exiles in the Old Covenant. But God's word to New Testament Christians isn't living in exile. There's a sense in which we're strangers and wanderers and sojourners, but we're inheriting the land. I feel like the commandments to us would be much more likened to the commandments that Joshua gave to the Israelites as they're coming into the land of promise and expulsing the enemies of God, rather than Jeremiah and Israel in exile and Babylon. And so I think part of it is just that this idea of two kingdom theology, this sharp divide between the sacred and the secular, this pre-mill that, Jesus is going to come back tomorrow and we're just shining brass on a sinking ship. And this idea that, at least for me, that's part of why I went to California to plant churches, which I think some people are called to do. But for me, I went to California to plant a church because it was just all I saw in the Christian life was plant churches and win souls. And so I was, well, if that's all it is, let's go to a difficult place behind enemy lines, snatch souls from the fire. And by God's grace, he did a lot. People were saved. The church was planted. It's still going on. It's in good hands. And all those things are wonderful. But as I've gotten older and as my theology has I hope by God's grace, has improved, I never want less than planting churches and winning souls. I just want more. I want to start a school. I want men in my church to start businesses and own businesses and build wealth and buy property and start publishing companies and write books and run for local office. And there's just a lot more that I want to do because I want to win and I want to win this world. And I don't believe that Peter was being literal when he says, that the earth will dissolve like snow. I don't think that that's the heart of God. I don't think the creation is groaning with great expectations for the sons of God to be revealed, meaning that creation is groaning for a mercy killing from the Lord, as some two kingdom guys would interpret, so that it can give way. No, it's groaning to be restored because we have a restorative God he's not coming back to burn it all and start completely over, but he's going to restore this earth, this world. Math will be in the new heavens and the new earth. What all truth is God's truth. And when you think like that, man, then you fight. And so it's like we have the atheistic, woke, Marxist, socialist, leftist agenda, and they're fighting for the world with everything they got.
It is at least interesting to think about. So just off the top of my head, I feel like he hasn't really gotten into post-millennialism yet, but post-millennialism would be the millennium already happened, the 1,000 years reign of Christ. Well, if it started when Christ was crucified, you think about 1,000 years later, roughly 1000 AD, around the time of Thomas Aquinas, you have the Renaissance 500 years later, Renaissance, Reformation, leading to the Industrial Revolution. And I don't know, it's kind of an interesting thought. Like, I don't know what I'm saying. This is all very new to me. I got to be honest. This is very new to me. And yeah, I definitely don't think that it's something that you're damned for not having the right position on the millennium. I don't know why I have so much trouble saying that. Millennium. I keep wanting to say millennial. And it's confusing because it says post-millennial, a millennial, and then it's the millennium. Millennium. But yeah, my pastor, who went through seminary school, he calls himself pan-millennial, where he basically just doesn't really have a position on this.
got because it's all they have. You know, they're like, you know, it's like a man with nothing to lose, or a man who's like, he's down to the last thread, the last thing that he has, and so they're scrappy. They're not playing nice. They're not obeying the 11th commandment. They're shrewd. They're fighting. They're giving it everything they got because it really is all they have. And for Christians, we have heaven. But we've just got such weak theology and such anemic theology and such myopic theology. We don't realize that, yes, we have heaven. Yes, we have Christ. But the new heaven and the new earth, this is where we're going to live with Christ.
Yeah.
And this matters.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
okay.
anyway, so yeah.
You have more to say, but just a point on that. That's exactly critical. I mean, the Puritans held to a perspective of the future and the world that was very different than the popular eschatology of today. Historic Christian tradition has seen in many times in many places the role of the church in the world in a very different way than modern Americans or evangelicals in the West. But just 2 points in terms of the earth. Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, "The meek shall inherit the earth." That's us. We'll inherit the earth, not the wicked. And by the way, he's quoting from the Psalms there, whether it's the wicked who inherit the earth or whether it's God's people. And Jesus says the meek shall inherit the earth. And so that wasn't a novelty for Jesus. He's quoting from the Old Testament there. But also in the premier explanation of the gospel itself in Romans, the book of Romans, the Apostle Paul says in the first chapter and last chapter that the goal of this gospel is to bring about the obedience of faith among all the nations for the sake of his name. That's the goal of the gospel, to win the world to Jesus Christ. That's the goal. Yeah. And further, he says, when he's talking about Abraham and the promises to Abraham, he says that Abraham's descendants would inherit the world. That's this place. That's this place. Yeah. And it's interesting you bring it up. The passage in 2 Peter chapter 3 about the fire and the dissolution. People think that that's the literal physical cosmos. I'm actually preaching this Sunday on the fact that it's actually not. What's interesting about how people think in the West today about our responsibilities and roles, Christians in terms, they have more of a Gnostic perspective, sometimes a dualist perspective of reality. They think about this higher story out there. That's the spiritual. That's the better. God's not concerned with this. Or they have just very Gnostic leanings where they say, this is a sin-cursed creation. There's evil here. God's going to destroy all this because he's not concerned with it. This is like this icky, sin-tainted world. And we want to get out to the higher spiritual place out there. Foreign to a biblical worldview and to true biblical Christianity, that idea. No, Scripture, I mean, the whole goodness of the gospel is that it's a gospel of a kingdom. It has a king, a God king, who actually comes to this earth. The incarnation was about heaven coming to earth. And Jesus says, I'm making all things new. And I mean, that's where we're going. The beauty of what makes it good news of a kingdom is that it has a king who's ruling over the world, drawing the nations to God. I mean, he shall have dominion from sea to sea, from the river to the ends of the earth. You know, you believe that story and you think differently. It's true. Yep. I mean, we just have to accept it. There's a difference between a church that has a perspective of Jesus coming to renew all of this, make all things new, and to win this world to God. You do tend to live differently when you believe that about the gospel, that this is a like you use, progressive, like we're moving into history with the gospel. We are taking down the gates, and they will never withstand what the church is doing. You tend to live differently, and you tend to think more long term. Whereas, as you said, brother, Christians today tend to have a very short-sighted perspective where they think, well, this can all go to hell in a handbasket, but I'm just waiting to get out of here and get to that higher story. Whereas if you actually think about it biblically, no, we're supposed to inherit the world, and Jesus is going to come back to a world that he's put under his feet. Now, if you think like that, you'll live differently. You'll marry differently. You'll have kids differently.
You know, he said a lot of stuff that sounds like Southern Israelite tier. Like we're supposed to be creating the kingdom of earth, shilling against the well, I mean, not shilling. It's the correct position, going against the Gnostic dualism. He's got some of them Southern Israelite He's one of them Drake boys. I've seen this guy a bunch. This guy's a total bro, dude. He's got his sleeve tattoos, and he did like an hour sermon where he's like, I used to party and I used to get laid and I used to like do a ton of drugs, and he's like telling his bro stories to the whole church. This is a good guy though, man. I think he's got a good perspective.
You'll build schools differently. You'll build businesses differently. You'll engage government differently. And what's interesting is that in this case, we have what we're talking about is a perspective of the future in the world that says, I'm okay with the seed being planted because this is going to become a tree one day. I'm okay with a little leaven because it's going to actually permeate the entirety of the loaf someday. And I'm actually thinking long term to, like, I don't know, let's think down to 500 generations from now. How can I build for that? You have that perspective. And then you have the perspective of the leftists today and the woke people and all the rest. They actually have a long-term perspective as well. So I think the real collision here is between a truly holistic, comprehensive, full-orbed Christian worldview and the popular ideology of today that says we'll work and we'll labor for that next generation. And, you know, they're perfectly fine with planting seeds too to become trees, but it's a wicked tree with a wicked root.
That's right. They want to plant poisonous trees. We want to plant trees of life. And I think the difficulty is you're absolutely right. You know, we have this dichotomy between, you know, two opposing forces, right? You know, friendship with the world is enmity with God. And so there's a sense that there's the world, and not speaking to the cosmos, but the worldly system that is underneath, held captive by the devil. It's underneath his domain, the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, the boastful pride of life. There's that world, the world being used in that sense. There's us, Christians with that holistic, full, mature theology. And the tough thing is that there's this third category, at least, and I'm sure we could come up with more, but then there's other Christians. And I'm not talking about false converts. I'm saying genuine, you know, as far as we can tell, regenerate brothers and sisters in Christ with not quite the theology that we would hope for them to have. And we're getting attacked by both. We're getting flanked, right? So we got the progressives, the atheists, the God-hating pagan, who of course is against us because they hate Christ. And we are his ambassadors, expanding and advancing his kingdom here on earth. But then we have our brothers on the other side of us, you know, like whenever we just got done with like a heated, you know, battle with the opposition and barely, you know, came out alive, and then, you know, you turn around and then there's your brother punching you in the face, you know, sucker punch, you know, and telling you that you weren't nice, you know, and telling that and it's like, oh my goodness, can I get a break, you know? And it's tough. And that's not to say that we can't sometimes fail in our rhetoric and our methods and our tactics.
Sure.
But I do think that we have to be ferocious, we have to be bold, we have to be faithful, we have to be shrewd, and we have to play the long game. Thanks for watching this video. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did,
interesting. Well, I got a lot of work to do here, guys. I mean, this is pretty much the beginning of me really wrapping my mind around the differences between premillennial, amillennial, and postmillennial. Though I feel like there wasn't really a clear description of what postmillennialism is there. To me, it just seems like premillennialism, I feel like, is what a lot of people assume. It's just kind of lumping the millennial. It's really hard to go back and forth between millennial and millennium. It's people lumping the millennium in with the apocalypse, the end of the world, the rapture, kind of just lumping all those things together as like the end times. I definitely think, just going with my gut inherently right off the bat, like premillennialism sounds like it makes the most sense to what I'm familiar with. And then amillennial is that the millennium started with Christ. And so theoretically, we've been living through this reign of Christ, and we're still living in it, and Satan is in the pit, and we maybe are heading towards this time when Satan will be released towards the pit, and then there will be the war. But I definitely was under the impression that Christ was literally coming back. So Christ needed to come back for the millennium, as far as I understand. So Yep, I'm pretty much just kind of starting from square one here. I think a podcast about Augustinianism would be great. Trying to look for some good sources on that. I am just definitely ready to get into that myself, like what it really means to be an Augustinian and just kind of going down point by point by point, learning every Augustinian position. Christ said he would return in John's lifetime. Yeah, well, I've heard the arguments before, like in this generation. Oh boy, this is really opening up a big can of worms here, because yeah, I've heard people kind of try to cope with that, like, oh, it's in this generation, but that doesn't really mean like while he's alive. And up until this point, I have heard the arguments for why that wasn't the case. Christ said he would return in John's lifetime. I mean, he did. Well, Christ did come back. So is that saying that like the second coming was the resurrection of Christ? So yeah, this just really kind of throws everything out the window for me. Like, so this is Christ's 1,000-year reign right now. So somehow this world is Christ reigning with an iron rod. I feel like I don't really see that. Like, I feel like it's just, I thought it was supposed to be like 1,000 years of peace and prosperity and Christian time. I mean, maybe that's what the West was. I guess that's what the West was leading up till maybe recently, and we're headed towards Christ or Satan being freed from the pit or something. I mean, yeah, that just about takes everything back to the drawing board for me. So I was basically accepting premillennialism. My position, without really realizing it, was premillennialism, and everything starts to get pretty weird for me when I try to think about it not being premillennialism. The gospel has ruled the world already. Yeah, I mean, I could see that. You know, follow the Roman Empire, medieval feudal Catholic times, and then like the beginning of this rebellion taking over would be the Enlightenment, and now really post-World War II, we've seen the beginning of the atheist resistance or the atheist rebellion. So, but I guess the big thing that's missing for me, I was really under the impression that like Christ specifically would be back and that would be his next coming. So is there a third coming of Christ? Does the Bible talk about a third coming of Christ, or? Yeah, it's just, I'm really not familiar with this position at all. I've just kind of always assumed premillennialism, I guess. But anyway, I guess that's all for today, guys. I'll be looking into this in my own time. This is a very interesting thing to study. So there's still like a tribulation and there's still a rapture, but I guess some people don't really believe in a rapture, or there's like a post-tribulation rapture, pre-tribulation rapture. Awful lot of stuff to sort out here. Boy, it's getting dark over here. Yeah, the times of the sun being out super late are kind of starting to go away over here as we head towards the fall in Alaska. The sword that issues from Christ's mouth is his word, the gospel that ruled the world. All right. Well, that's definitely that's the more symbolic direction. Less literal. So what about, I don't know. It's just like a lot. It's a lot to take in for me right now. So I guess we're not going to hash this out right now. maybe we should cover this topic again another time. Maybe we could just like discuss this tomorrow. I keep going back and forth, man. Sometimes I'm like, these are really not that hard to do, and it's just a good habit, and 5 days a week a podcast is great. But then sometimes I think that's a little bit too much pressure for you guys. Like, you guys want to be supportive, but it's a lot to ask for you guys to be here every single day of the week. So, we have Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursday. I just kind of chill, but I kind of don't like chilling. I like the structure. But, tomorrow I'm going to do some sort of a stream at the allotted time, 6:30 p.m. PST, and we'll be done by 8 p.m. my time at the latest. All right, well, this topic is a lot for me. I have not gone very deep in this. I definitely just assumed the premillennial position, and so I'm going to really be looking into amillennial and postmillennial. So as far as like the end of the world, as far as the second coming. So you're saying like Christ said he would come again in the life of John. So what does that mean in terms of the end of the world? What does that mean in terms of like getting ready to assume our eternal bodies and the judgment? So Christ is coming again for that? That will be the third coming of Christ? Or is he not going to be there for that either? Is there like, it's just really, yeah, this is a lot for me right now. It's clearly, I'm not really, I mean, I didn't go to seminary, so I don't know. I feel like this is the big glaring hole in my knowledge that I'm just getting to right now. And but I take it still, like, I don't know if this changes things for my understanding of the end times, but I'm under the impression that Christ is going to come back, and then everybody will be resurrected and judged. The coming of the Lord in the air was his ascension. All right, maybe we'll discuss this tomorrow. Maybe we can have like just a big theological discussion tomorrow, and that can be the chill stream. But anyway, guys, for now, I'm going to wrap it up. It's been good. It's been real. I definitely feel like this pretty much just feels like the podcast like it was before. Seems like everybody's here for the most part. So we're hoodie. God bless you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. And yeah, maybe we can get into a deep discussion about this tomorrow. That would be cool. In the meantime, enjoy your